morning, everybody. So Jasper and I have had a really, plus a whole lot of other people involved, had a really incredible journey meeting a lot of new wonderful people this year. And we'd like to share that with you.
Hello. Okay, so Portal 2 is our first-person puzzle game that we released in April last year. And as many of you know, it's about manipulating wormholes on surfaces. And that lets the player play with distance, time, momentum, gravity, and other physical elements. And the game was very well received. One of the major requests was people wanted more content. And we realized fairly quickly that there was no way we could meet the demand with our staff. It just took such a long time to develop the puzzles and a very short time to consume them. By the same token, we were really stunned by the sheer amount of creative passion that our customers showed. Just all kinds of amazing things started appearing on the internet. And things that we never expected, including amazing costumes, and also Portal 2, the interpretive dance. Really tremendous. And often with our games, we release our authoring tools for free. And one thing we noticed was sort of a dearth of... It's really fantastic. So, but we really were expecting to see a lot more puzzles being created. At the same time, Hammer, our authoring tool that we release, is fairly complicated. And in order to really develop custom content with our engine, you really have to spend a lot of time digging into a lot of esoteric technical things and using less friendly tools. So we also have a wiki, and when we initially put the wiki, we were sure that this would really help. But it turns out there's still just so much to learn that it was really off-putting for a lot of folks. This is the list of things you have to do, and those are all links. So we started thinking about, well, what if we created an easier-to-use tool? And we started prototyping a standalone puzzle maker with the idea that it's a simple point-and-click interface for anybody who would use Portal. So we started developing this at just about the same time that Gabe was here last year addressing this conference.
So he and I were here last year, and he was ruminating on what's the difference between a commercial game and an entertainment game, and there's so much, an education game, and there's so much education in commercial games. And he also shared all the other interesting things that community members had emailed us and sent us about how they were using all sorts of different aspects of it. So I went back to the office and started talking to the Portal 2 team and looking at this tool.
Yeah, and we saw Gabe's speech and we're like, hey.
Peanut butter and jelly, peanut butter and chocolate.
Chocolate, yeah.
So what can we do with this? So in September, we then got involved with Digital Promise, which you've heard about this morning. And we quickly put up this one website, this one page, one destination. Hey, we're going to start getting involved in the education community. We're not really sure how. And we happen to have a video. We have some really great, talented people who do a lot of film back at Dow, and we had a 7th grade field trip come in to learn how to use Hammer. And we put up this video. And this really struck a lot of chords. And so what we ended up, we heard from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, really the majority of whom were educators. And we heard all sorts of interesting stories from them. Things like this pinball machine from an engineering mechanics class at the University of Nebraska. This is Cameron Pittman. We'd like you to meet him. And he is a high school, he's actually 8th grade and high school, it's 8th grade and above, physics teacher in Nashville. And he wrote to us and said, hey, I've been using Portal as part of my curriculum. I've been doing this for a couple of years. And here is what my lesson plan looks like. And we've created a relationship with Cameron, and we'll show you some things that he's been doing in a little bit. This is Scott Hawley. He also just wrote to me one day and said, oh, I think this is amazing. I'm a professor. I have a freshman, sophomore physics class. And we sort of spoke on a Friday. Monday morning, I come into my email, and he has already put together lesson plan content for elementary, high school, and college level.
And it's really neat. At the college level, he really digs into the subtle differences between reality and game mechanics. So, like, we were learning a whole bunch, too.
Oh, yeah. So this is something, so then he actually videotaped his class for us, because what he did is he had his college students demonstrate and illustrate principles of physics using the game.
Yeah, this is an interesting slide. We have an element in Portal, it's a light bridge, which is basically a force field made out of light. And when I was looking at this slide, I guess the student used the principle that photons have no mass but momentum, and he calculated if you actually were to touch this light force field, how long it would take to catch on fire. I guess 2.79 milliseconds. I emailed Scott and asked him, is that, am I reading that right? He said, yes, that's a conservative estimate. It was good.
So we had all of this. We were like, okay, we have the Puzzle Baker Perpetual Testing Initiative is the official title of it. And we have all these educators who are really interested in it. So we felt like now it was time for students.
So we immediately started bringing in students and teachers into the development process and integrating them into our daily and weekly play tests. They turned out to be extremely valuable because they gave us not only the same kind of information in terms of usability from other play testers, but they also really gave us a strong sense of where the game worked and where it didn't, specifically in education.
And I know there's a physics book there, and it looks like it's totally planned, but that's actually Yasser's desk, and he just happened to have it sitting there.
I need to brush up.
I know, you had to brush up on your physics.
And this was one of the first levels created by our teachers during the development process using a prototype puzzle maker.
So now we're going to show it to you.
So this is the final release Puzzle Maker. One of our goals for this was to have absolutely zero tutorial time, being as it's part of the game. And that turned out to be super handy for other purposes as well. So you start off with a fully valid map. You click and drag to select surfaces, and then you can manipulate them by dragging the mouse. It's designed to be very malleable and very quick to play with ideas. You can just right-click and change the portability of surfaces. And you can double-click to select an array of surfaces and move them. So I'm going to add some items here. So this is placing a button, and then I can just click to link it to a door. And then I can continue to manipulate those items, and those links are maintained. Here I'll put a cube, and you'll notice it automatically creates the dropper for you. And we'll hit the play button. And so under the hood, it's using the same tools that we used to make the game, but all of the irrelevant bits have been hidden. And then it brings you into the first person. And so here's our chamber. And so our goal was to allow players to really get to a full quality experience very quickly. And also to be able to quickly go back and forth between the author view and the consumer view. And so here I'll place a Sentry robot. All of the little items have affordances that kind of communicate how they work. You can manipulate large chunks of the puzzle while maintaining those relationships. Here I put a vat of deadly goo. And let's put a catapult here. And so one of the interesting things is we kind of did a lot of the math with this to make it friendly as a first step. Put in lasers, deadly lasers, and we have angled panels, of course, and this allows us to have more complex trajectories and relationships. Every option is on a fly-out menu. Put in some stairs, and this is a piston platform, which allows the surface to come up and down. And we also have energy fields, which work with the different puzzle elements in different ways. And so all of these are meant to be adjustable at any time, and to really promote iteration, rapid iteration, and play. And here's a tractor beam. Put in some blue paint, which allows the player to jump really high, or objects covered in them to sort of bounce around. We'll look at how that's useful later. So this approachability was really key in making this work, because we really wanted this to be an extension of the game. So here's our blue paint. And a lot of these hazards are pretty easy to dispatch, and that's on purpose, to make the consequences of failure very, very small. And that's the puzzle maker.
Incredibly apparent very quickly as soon as we put any child of almost any age and slash student and teacher in front of this. It's just any person, how engaging it is to actually be able to create your own level, to have the agency, to have the feedback loop that's so quick, and to be able to edit at will on the fly. Meet Lisa Castaneda, who is a middle school math teacher at the Evergreen School. She's the teacher in our field trip video. So we started working more with the teachers and the students.
Yeah, she was one of our beta.
Yep. So we put together, so here's more kids who are just having a really good time with it. One thing we did is we found that students of every age, every gender, they really found it engaging, fascinating. We thought they'd get bored at a certain point, but they didn't. This is the Ignite program, which is a program for young women to keep them interested in STEM education. They came and visited us from Chief Sealth High School. So really powerful, engaging moments. The beta test, what we did was, when we heard from all these hundreds of educators, we tried to then put together a group of beta test teachers who were from a diversity of geographic locations, the schools from socioeconomic classes, urban, rural, private, public, parochial, homeschool, online. We really wanted to have representation from across a continuum, just to figure out how this was going to work. We had some very powerful anecdotes come our way. So this is Cully, and he teaches in the Arlington Independent School District in Grand Prairie in Texas. And he told us a story about creating a puzzle and having his honors science students try to solve it. And they had 5 minutes to do it, and nobody could do it. And so then one of his remedial students came to him, and he asked to try it. And so this student sat down, and he solved it in 3 minutes. And we couldn't have said it, hopefully you got to read that quote, but we couldn't have said it better than the 6th grader. And so giving this opportunity for these students to find the independence, the freedom, the opportunity to interact with something in a way that makes them feel smart. If you played the game, it makes you feel smart. It makes me feel smart. And having these, for instance, with the Ignite program, when they came in, having these young women come in and saying things like, what is this? What am I doing? What's the point? Am I going to break it? And 30 minutes later, saying, I'm going to make the most difficult puzzle ever. No one's ever going to be able to solve it. I feel smart. Those are direct quotes. So Cameron has really gotten into it. And so he started making some videos. And these are just two stills that we want to show you.
Yeah, and I'm really interested with in what Cameron is doing now, because he's kind of pushing it to the next level, beyond simply demonstrating using the game or building his own demonstrations. He's actually started pushing students to design their own experiments. So we'll take a group of students and say, okay, create a chamber that tests the strength of gravity. And they'll all come up with different solutions and use different puzzle pieces, and then he'll use that as a discussion on engineering principles.
And we've had, this is his blog, physicswithportals.com, and we will ourselves be blogging about it the next day or two, but it's live and you can go to that. So we've certainly had some challenges along the way. Mrs. C, that's Lisa Castaneda, she's actually taught it to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students already. And has actually, since she's also a graduate student, has done some pre and post assessment on them and is doing the analysis of the data right now. We also have sort of several grad students around the country who have done little things with us, and we've tried to support. And we have a bigger stealth analysis, stealth assessment study that's being done by Val Shute at Florida State University. So there's all these really interesting projects going on, and we're really excited to see what's going to happen with it. You know, Cameron is someone who's actually tried to be teaching in the classroom. He has full support of his principal, but has had some problems with IT, as you might imagine. But we'll tell you how we're distributing it in that way. There's also been this interesting aside. This is Dan, and he's at the Nonpareil Institute in Texas, which is for young adults to learn game development technologies for them to be able to find employment. These are young adults who are on the autism spectrum. And when Yasser has actually visited, and he gave them access to the Puzzle Maker beta, and it was so incredibly powerful, the response that Dan saw in his students, and that how they were able to be drawn in for longer periods of time, talking about, he would explain to us that there would be kids who could only sit at a computer for a few minutes, but being able to utilize the Puzzle Maker and being able to see almost immediately what their work is. It's so genuine, it's so authentic. They're actually acting exactly the way the people at Valve do in creating levels at this point. So that's been very interesting. We've heard others from other parents of students with ADHD that it also has had an interesting bond as well.
So another big component of the release was the workshop. We released a workshop in the fall of last year, and we recently added Portal to it. And it's essentially a place where people can upload their creations, share them, subscribe to them, and rate them. And this is a really neat dynamic, because it kind of makes the next levels of Portal more about listening and about empathy. So you're really building on all of your gameplay skills, but in a more socially relevant way. And it's been really amazing. The first 24 hours, I think we had 12,000 uploads, and I think we're up to like 150,000 right now. But
in contrast, there were only about 200 puzzles created and hammered by the community.
Yeah, that was over months and months.
And that was over months.
Yeah, so a really interesting thing is seeing the non-puzzles that people have posted. We're seeing quite a bit of uploads that are about teaching other players, sort of peer-to-peer teaching. And we're seeing a lot of interesting things in binary and in electronics. And these are done by kids. They'll often post YouTube videos describing what they're doing. So this is a logic gate, and just on a weekly basis, we see new circuits we had never imagined or anticipated being done in the Puzzle Maker, but being replicated in very clever ways. So here's one of my favorite examples. This is a binary adding circuit. So they've created these buttons, 2 sets of buttons, so you can kind of add things in binary. So you can put 1 there, and it'll add to 1. And if I put another button here, so 1 plus 1 equals 2, and you can set this one to 3, so 1 plus 3 equals 4, and it works. And the neat thing about this is it's sort of a macro space demonstration, just using the gameplay skills. You can input the controls, you can see what the mechanisms and the logic are doing, and then you can see the output all in one space. I wish there was something like that when I was learning these concepts, but it was really fun. Here's a counter and a random number generator. I mean, we had never anticipated these kinds of things. And also we're seeing people take things in other directions. This is a chamber that has lots of those platforms, so you can kind of shrink the room. And when you have a lot of spheres in here covered with glue and you shrink the room, the particles now bounce around quite a bit more. And this is a demonstration of ideal gas law, so the relationship of volume, pressure, temperature. And the neat thing about this is the physics engine in Portal doesn't really do fluid dynamics. It doesn't have a concept of temperature or pressure. It's really more of a rigid body system. But using the game mechanics and combining them in clever and anticipated ways, people can demonstrate those kinds of concepts.
So at this point, we have the Puzzle Maker, which does all these creative things. We have a group of educators, and we've also heard from parents and students themselves, who think that we should figure out what to do with Portal and Portal 2. And we figured the things that they asked for the most was, one, give me some content. I want to do something with this. How do I get this into my classroom? And at the same time, they wanted to actually get it into their school. So we were trying to solve for both. That's what we like to do, is problem solving. And so we put up Teach with Portals. It just went live on Friday. Got it in under the wire there. And what this is it gives you the ability, it creates the community. We've extended the community of how they're interacting with the game so that the educators are able to post and share lesson plans. We're not writing them. We're just going to create the framework and the destination. There's also a private forum for educators. There will be a wiki as soon as we get back to the office to start setting one up, and we know that will, there's a lot to do, it's only Friday. And we know, we're so just absolutely curious to see where this is all going to go and what's going to happen with it. So just to give you some examples of some of the things we have tried to encourage is that these are going to be, this is the summaries, these are Mrs. C's math lesson plans. Right now there's about 7 physics lesson plans up, 5 for math, and over the next weeks we'll be adding more and more, some of which have already been submitted. For instance, there's an English teacher at the Bellevue Big Picture School in Washington State, and he's written something around story arc and character development, all around literacy. So everybody, the community is so much more creative than we could ever be, just back in Bellevue. So one of the things as I said, that we're encouraging is we really do want to try to give the community what they need, and what we've heard from educators is they do want it aligned to standards. So we are trying to encourage the behavior of the educators when they submit the lesson plans to align them to Common Core, Next Generation Science Standards. Cameron also did it to ACT and just physics standards. So we will flex as we feel that teachers will give us creative college students who will write lesson plans. Everybody will work with everyone to see how we can distribute the information. So this is what we put together here. What motivated us was very much, Gabe talks about how when he saw the field trip video, he recognized how powerful these tools can be in the hands of students. So it's really been the community and our fan base, the customers who have pointed us in this direction, and then it's just snowballed with that. One of the things that I have felt so strongly about in terms of equity and justice and access is being able to, an email from a teacher in the LA school system, and she's a math teacher in high school, and it was just a very simple pleading email saying, is there anything you can do to help my kids pass Algebra 1 so they can graduate from high school? I don't know anything about your game, but if there's anything you can do, we would so appreciate it. And so that's at that point when you go find that math teacher who's really creative and innovative, and they start writing lesson plans. So, so one of the ways that the way we're distributing this, say that, is that we have a limited version of STEAM, which is called STEAM for Schools, and what we're doing is asking for teachers, It's going to be after-school programs, organizations, anywhere where there's a student relationship. This includes homeschooling, and for them to submit a form to be part of, where it's still beta, over the summer. And then what we'll do is we'll have them be able to be part of the private forum, and they will receive anonymous passwords. The teachers will be the administrators of anonymous accounts, and these accounts and passwords will be kept by the teacher. And in that, the only thing that the student, the user, can use and access in STEAM for Schools are going to be what we put through the pipeline, which is the game Portal 2, the Puzzle Maker, which accompanies it, and then also Cameron has actually created a number of, he has scaffolded a number of Portal levels. He actually went into the game, played it a bazillion times, figured out which levels in Portal 2 had the most physics competencies in it, and then recreated the levels in the Puzzle Maker. So there will be all of these. So you don't have to have your students do the entire game. You can actually just do this series of about 12 puzzles. And I think we forgot to say that it will be free. Yeah, we'd love to take questions.
About 6 minutes for questions.
Did we stun you?
We have one over here.
Oh, okay.
STEAM for Schools. I like STEAM. I use STEAM for most of my games. Will there be ever an opportunity for other organizations that make learning games to distribute through STEAM for Schools?
I think that as the community, I mean, we're excited. I mean, one of the things actually Gabe said last year was we challenged other developers to figure out ways to adapt their games. We have had some input from other game companies about thinking about how they can adapt what they're doing. We're hoping that by presenting this and by working with educators and parents and students that they will be inspired as well. You notice I didn't really answer the question.
No. I'll bug you later.
Use your imagination.
Hi, this is great. It's a lot of work though, and I was just wondering how you were funding this. Is this, a CSR staff for Valve, or is this, a grant or something like that?
Valve is a commercially successful company, and the way Valve works is Valve follows the passions of both the community, the customers, and those who work within it. So we had to go out and find people. This is obviously lots of different people have worked on this, and there are lots of like-minded individuals who think that education is super important, may not have been super satisfied with their own education, and see the relationships. One of the things that I found so incredible when I came to Valve a year ago is that when I would hear, and I know this has been said for 2 days, but when I would hear game designers talk about how they were constructing a game and what they were doing in terms of frustration and challenge and hard fun and low risk and ability to fail, and I just said, well, this is what it should be like in a good classroom.
Hi, this looks fantastic. I want to know if we're going to have learner designers are going to have the opportunity to write lines for Gladys. Composition that goes into this as well, because I think that would be a ton of fun using that part of the brain as well.
The nice thing about the workshop is it supports many different types of content. So we're not sure yet what those will be, but the system is designed to be very modular. So we hope, that modularity was really defined during our play testing when we saw teachers and students using it. So yeah, we have a big list of things that we're interested in.
Oh, one of the things, of course, we heard is, well, now that you've hidden the math, can you expose the math?
That's right.
So some of the things that we actually sort of have them written as Kanbars, but as we know that we need to come up with making it really easy. So, if you're changing the trajectory of the faith play, then you want to be able to actually have a little box there, maybe a slider or something like that. So people are thinking of those things changing. mask, the mask of the cube, the companion cube, that would be something.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great
And
ideas.
certainly narrative elements that would work for the game, we can imagine working really well as a lesson.
I think in front of you, the young man.
Coming right off of that, actually. So I'm a student. This is all really, really cool. And Valve is notorious for creating really engaging, awesome narratives. Like, there's this whole meta discussion just about Chell, the main character, even though you didn't go into the game trying to make a story about Chell. Is there any intention of using narrative to engage or excite learning? Like, is that the next part of this project?
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, so David Hunter, who's the teacher at the Bellevue Big Picture School, actually one of the reasons we left the game in, we at first thought that we would just do the Puzzle Maker, we'd give access to the Puzzle Maker and the scaffolded levels. But then we realized that all these people had all these creative ideas about it for literacy and because of story, and so we decided we'd leave it in until, we didn't want it to be onerous to teachers to have the entire game, but obviously they'll be able to administer it as they see fit. So we hope there'll be lots of opportunities to be able to take advantage of just a fabulous story.
Yeah, the narrative always enriches the mechanics and the visual, so yeah, it's a critical component.
There's somebody over here.
Thanks. I know that you guys said that the beta is being open primarily to teachers. I'm wondering if there will be opportunities for students who are already graduated from high school to participate at some later time.
So that's actually something that we want to figure out how we can give that opportunity to students. I got an email yesterday saying, okay, this is great, wonderful, but I'm just a student and I don't think my teacher's going to use it, and so what can I do? So we do want, that is something that we'll be thinking hard on over the next weeks about what we want to encourage that community to spring up and maybe Learn with Portals, which is that original website, could be the place that will happen. But we think that the opportunity for students to talk to each other and to think about, to really delve into so much of the conversation and not just have it just for educators. And we want parents to be able to do that too. So we'll figure it out, and if you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them. There's a few questions up there. Oh, up there, sorry.
Hi, thanks. I'm Julie with Girls Start. We're a nonprofit that does girls STEM education in the nation. We've been involved in a few beta tests and for free. And then what we find is after they're in full force, they want to charge. Is this something that you're expecting to keep free for educators or start charging and then educators won't be able to pay for it?
This will be free to educators. This will be free
Thank
to
you.
I don't know how many of you know, but Valve actually, once you own a game, you can get the tools where you can mod for free. And so this is just us taking one step back and saying, well, we think this is important enough that all of it should be free.
There's some over here. Sure, the one in the front, and then one can go back.
We're not coordinating very
Oh,
well.
sorry.
Okay.
This is great. Is there any plans for having people, students able to upload their own puzzles, others download them, share them, review them, that sort of community that can develop and really encourage people to make their own novels?
Thank you for asking it. No, we didn't plant that. So this is one of those, there's challenges in every project, and this is one of them. So we know that, so right now, if you were teaching it in a class and the kids have their different accounts, the only way that students can share each other's puzzles is to physically get up and sit in the chair. And that's because at this point, one really needs to have that walled garden, and that to have that community aspect, what we would like to figure out is how you can have accounts that all talk to each other. And so that way, what is envisioned is you could have, Mrs. C's 6th grade math class can all be sharing it on sort of like a workshop situation. And then maybe Mrs. C's math class and Cameron's science class, they can start putting up puzzles and they can do some competitions and things like that, and maybe you can do it across the world. So this is definitely something that is, up there on the list and figuring out how to make that happen in a technically viable way, and also one in which we are really having the functionality that's really important to schools.
Yeah, I think it's important just to be kind of cautious because, we
Yeah.
are an entertainment game company and we want to, make sure we do it in the right way. So it's going to be gradual.
Is there any planning to include a develop assessment tool for the teachers? It sounds very complex because so much freedom is...
Well, you're going to do it for us. So when we put up the wiki, so there are already teachers out there as part of this beta test who have started composing what would look like. Like, I'm not an educator. I've worked in schools. I'm not an educator. I can't sit down and say, okay, these are the steps you should take. It's going to be more of a conversation, and the wiki will, in the Valve developer part, people will be able to edit it, and they'll be able to put it in. We'll probably end up with moderators. So this is where we need the community to help us be able to put our best foot forward, and you just tell us what you need.
Yeah, we do instrument the game quite a bit for the purposes of, finding out where people are getting hung up and to kind of maximize the fun. So now we're learning, there's kind of an overlap, and we've already started instrumenting other things that we wouldn't have otherwise.
To riff off of what Jim G was talking about with the modding, you're saying you wanted to release like the math underlying things. Have you considered just opening up an API and let programmers add their own, whatever to access that and display it, or let the community mod into the system for you rather than trying to do all of it yourself? That would be part of his whole paradigm he was talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of the pieces in the puzzle editor are actually built from hammer parts, which are it's a much more open system. So it's very, very doable.
Just a thought about when students make requests, that you might suggest to the student that they could write a proposal to their teacher, principal, administration about it to get them rolling. Certainly some students would take you up on that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There's an FAQ on Teach with Portals, which answers all the questions about what it is, what's Portal to, would it be appropriate for the classroom, what are the technical requirements, system requirements for it. So we hope that, and as we hear what superintendents need to hear, principals, parents, teachers will try to answer as many things and make it as accessible as possible. I think there's some questions up there.
Yeah, I'm a developer, and I was curious, with all the other games that you guys have, do you plan on releasing these kind of tools for future games and games that already exist? And I can imagine for your staff, these tools could save so much time when iterating through development.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so is that something that Valve's committed to doing, internally, or for the modding community to continue making the creation of the games faster and kind of faster with all their projects?
I hope so. It's hard to say where things will go. In the past, Valve has, we've always kind of shied away from focusing on that. We felt that it's better to just put the tools out there and see what people can do. And I think that has worked really well in the past, but things have really changed now. People are much more, there's an expectation to contribute in a way they're in the mainstream community. So I certainly hope so.
And actually, on a somewhat related note, it sounds like we've actually built an infrastructure that would make it very easy to add other games and for other developers to also use this to distribute the games within schools. Are there any plans to expand this beyond Portal?
You mean the Steam for Schools?
Yeah, similar. Yeah. It's I hope that we will be able to provide a place for there to be a lot of really great conversation, creativity, and innovation. And so where that will lead us, we will see.
Yeah, we're it depends on other developers. So I'm
If you have ideas about the games, games that you think that should be in the classroom with some adaptability to them, write to them. Tell them that's how we got started.
I think other developers would really love to hear about these opportunities. I mean, it really excited us, and it's just important that we be made aware of it.
It's cycling back
Oh,
up.
okay.
I think we're done. We'll be around the rest of today because we're learning so much too. So thank you so